Gracie and I are at the coal mines today, and what we're going to do is pay a visit to the Unknown Cottage, as I've called it in the past. I've done a couple of videos already on this one, and I thought I'd just come back to this one again. Every time Gracie and I pass this cottage, it makes me wonder what it was used for. I've put a few suggestions forward in the past. One of them was it might have been for the sergeant from the Military Barracks, which is up on the hill, but I was never quite convinced with that answer. So we're going to have another look at today and see if any other evidence has come forward and try to work out what this unknown cottage was used for. So let's start on the northwest corner and see what we've got. So here I have the beginning of the brick return, and it travels here under all these bricks, under the brick rubble. It travels up to the fireplace here, and to here is the middle of the fireplace. That's 2.85. Now the fireplace is about 1 metre across. It's still quite substantial. You can't really see much of it here due to the brick rubble around it, and there's also a lot of sand that's been blown down from where the original garden was behind the military barracks, but it is probably 3 or 4 at least bricks high. If we follow along from the middle of the fireplace, the 2.85 mark, along my rope line, and I've got about 2 bricks lengths, 1, 2 coming this way, and then after that there's nothing. There's plenty of lime mortar that the convicts used to put the fireplace together, but from this point on there are no brick returns. And following right down here to the northeast corner, I don't see a single brick return. Those 2 bricks I put there obviously to hold my rope together. So the total length of this wall, or half the wall, beginning of the brick return down to here, is 5.7 metres. Now we'll travel up the easterly wall along my rope line, and again, sorry to say, there's not a single brick return. Tiny little bit of rubble now and then, a little bit there you can see, a little bit there. But I come up to this point here where I've done a corner. There's a couple of sandstone blocks, loose sandstone blocks, some there, a few bricks, but nothing to show that there was a brick wall down this side here at all. So I have a distance of this rope line on the easterly wall, or what I assume is the easterly wall, of about 4.2 metres. Now we travel along the southern wall, and again, no bricks. Some bricks here, this is all just brick rubble, but there are no brick returns, pieces of sandstone there. And we come up to here where there's a flat sandstone slab, and that's at about the 2.85 mark. Doesn't seem to go back any further. There's a bit of brick rubble behind it, a broken brick beside it, but it just seems to be a solitary slab of sandstone. And this piece of sandstone lines up very nicely with our fireplace there in the distance. So the sandstone is about 2.85 in from the wall. Now we'll continue from the sandstone along, and there's a lot of soil, ash, bits of coal, pebbles washed down from the hill here beside me on my left, covering where a brick return would be, but I don't believe there is a brick return. There's nothing here from this side of the sandstone, and travelling towards the west, there is nothing here where it's a little bit more clear. There's some bricks there under where I've placed my corner for the ropes, but they're just brick rubble. They're certainly not a brick return. So we'll travel along where I believe the westerly wall would have been, and again, nothing. Lots of brick rubble here, more pieces of brick, but there is no brick return. And we keep moving along till we come to the northwest corner where we started at the beginning. So from going around the area of the cottage, the only brick return we have is from this corner here to the fireplace. There's nothing else remaining. Is there a chance that the brick walls on this cottage were actually built and all the bricks were stripped away? They were either stolen or reused by the government to build other cottages further down the peninsula when they were expanding the probation stations there, and this one was closed down. The first thing I think of when looking at these sandstone blocks is, are they building lentils? That is, were they lentils placed above the doorway and windows of the structure? Let's have a look at some examples of the lentils that were placed over the doorways and windows here at the coal mines. These old photos here give us a good picture of the lentils that were located on the buildings. When I measure these blocks, they're around 48 centimetres up to around 70 centimetres, the longer ones there. But they average around 60 centimetres in width. Now, none of those are long enough to be a window lentil, let alone a door lentil. So where do these blocks come from if they weren't used as part of the building process? I'm located at the outbuilding behind the military barracks on top of the hill, which is very close to the Unknown Cottage. Where Gracie's sitting now is a whole pile of sandstone blocks, and they range in size between about 50 centimetres up to around 72 centimetres. And none of these blocks here are long enough to be either a window lentil or a door lentil. So they're all used for part of the construction of the walls of this building. And even though over time some of these sandstone blocks were replaced with bricks, you can see here at the back that it was the predominant building material. Now, how these blocks landed down here from the military barracks up there through the trees on the hill is anyone's guess. I'll just make a guess that probably they were brought down horse and cart or maybe a truck or something, found they had too much of a load, so they dumped them here. And then later on, when this was built with tourists in mind, the pathways, they found that the blocks were blocking the pathway there and decided to move them down to here. That's just a guess, but at the end of the day, they're human erratics and we're never really going to know the reason how they ended up here, but I'm 95% sure that they would have come from the military barracks on top of the hill there. So does the absence of any stone lentils mean that this building was never built? Well, there is one example here at the coal mines where they didn't use stone lentils, but still it was a brick building. Let's pop back to the settlement and have a quick look at that one. I'm now at the civilian officers' quarters down in the main settlement area, and this is the only doorway in a brick building that has a lentil remaining. And of course, it is made of timber, not stone. When I first saw this piece of timber, I thought it was just some reconstruction work that had gone on in the 70s, because I know that the front of the building from this photo here shows that there were lentils made of stone across all the windows at the front of the building. And looking at this piece of timber here, which is original, this one here looked a lot more worn than the one up here. But when I got to look here, I can see there's a convict nail, and that means that this was an original piece of timber that lasted the period of time, and they've done the reconstruction work across the top there. So that tells us at some time they did use timber as lentils in the brick buildings. From that doorway at the civilian officers' quarters, we can see that they could have used wooden lentils as a support as opposed to sandstone block. There are some bricks remaining here, but would it be enough to make a brick cottage? So let's pop down to the main settlement and have a look at the remains of a brick cottage there. It has similar dimensions and a fireplace to this building here. Gracie and I are down at the civil officers' quarters, and we're in one of the rooms of the building. The room we're in is the one that you can see on the photo there. This room here gives us an idea of how big the Unknown Cottage would have been on the hill if it was made of brick. And this back wall here is about 4.8, and the one behind Gracie is about 4.1. So that's approximately the dimensions of the building up there. Now, I did a rough count of the amount of bricks that would take to build a building like this. It gives me around 4,500 bricks. Now, this might have been a little bit taller originally, I'm not sure, but going on around 4,500 gives us something to play with. On this building here, it was triple brick on the back walls, and I expect the front wall, while the dividing walls in the room were only double brick. Our cottage up on the hill was just double brick, so I've done my figures on it being double brick. So of those 4,500 bricks we'd need to make a room of this size, around 500 I worked out down there are required for the chimney. Now, just looking at these piles of bricks that are left here, I've done a rough count on them, and I'd probably say that if they're all whole brick, there would be around 250 brick, including those piles at the back, the fireplace itself, and where this mound is on the side, I think a lot of those have been pushed into the soil here because it was a lot wetter here at one time. So these bricks here really just enough to probably build the fireplace to a 3/4 height. Over time, some would have been stolen, a lot would have been moved. Even today, people pick up bricks here and move them around. During the older days, so to speak, the government did reuse some of the bricks at the settlements for the other probation stations, but I don't believe that's the case for this building here. Being up on the hill, it was out of the way, and the buildings down at the main settlement, both the brick buildings and the sandstone buildings, are all low-hanging fruit, where people could come in and take the bricks, take the sandstone, and easily ship it out, as opposed to coming up the hill here. So if this building was not made of bricks, what was it made of? And we'll pop up to the old military barracks up the hill there and see if we can pick up a few clues there. Gracie and I are now at the military barracks on top of the hill. This is the original military barracks, and it was made entirely of timber, apart from 2 fireplaces. One where Gracie's sitting there now, which was quite a large fireplace compared to the other fireplaces at the coal mines in the brick buildings. And there was another located over there where the sergeant's quarters were. So all these bricks here came from those 2 fireplaces, and I'm sure it has been extensively robbed as well. But you do not see a single lentil, a sandstone lentil, anywhere within this area. There's plenty over there at that back building, because the back building obviously is made of sandstone, but here in this wooden building there is not a single lentil to be seen, because when they were constructing entirely of timber, they didn't need to have lentils present made of sandstone. From looking at the old military barracks that was made of wood, I believe that this cottage here, the walls were made of timber, not brick. Even though they had a brick return on that side there, I believe the back of the fireplace, apart from the fireplace itself, was all enclosed with wood down the sides here and around there to the back of where Gracie is. A wooden building with a brick fireplace. So that explains why there are no stone lentils up here, and even if the lentils were made with timber, as the one example we saw down there still aren't enough bricks here to make a brick building. Next question is, was this building ever occupied? We have a couple of fragments of glass from old bottles, a good sign, but those bottles could have been used by the bricklayers to store water in while they were building the project, and got broken for some issue. So they're helpful, but they're not conclusive evidence. But what we have here on the side of the cottage, though, is what I believe is conclusive evidence. And you can see here this darker coloured mound, and that is what I call fireplace spoil. If we have a closer look, you can see that there's lots of ash that make up these piles, and there's also burnt and unburnt coal, as well as the little pebbles. This spoil dump started somewhere up here, I believe, and over time, due to weather or humans and animals, it's been pushed down right down to here. Now, am I making this up, or is it a one-off, or what? Let's go and have a look at another example of a fireplace spoil, just to back up what I'm saying here. Gracie and I are down at the supervisor's cottage, and I'm standing at the back door of the cottage. In front of me you can see a large piece of stone with 2 sticks going down the side. Well, those 2 sticks represent where the hallway used to be, and the hallway used to go all the way through to the front door, where those large pieces of stone, which are lentils, are in the distance there. And I believe this back door is the back door you see in this photo here. Now there's also another broken piece there to the right, which I believe married up with this one here. I suspect it may have come across from that doorway that would have been going into that room there. Quite easy to see just here alone. There's a fireplace here, and at the back here there's another fireplace. And all the rooms in this building here had a fireplace, apart from one, which was a storeroom. So we know that they'd have to take this spoil from the fireplaces out of the building. And if you look across here, where Gracie's patiently sitting, she's sitting on a large spoil dump. The spoil dump is quite extensive, travels right across Gracie here, and comes down to a large mound under the tree. There's always a tree tailing off on the edge there. What we see on the ground here is the same as what we see up at the Unknown Cottage. There's a lot of ash, there's burnt coal, there's pieces of unburnt coal, and there are pieces of rock as well. Pebbles and even rocks were found in the coal that was being shipped out of the coal mines on a regular basis. The rocks were sometimes mixed into the coal accidentally, but often the convicts used to add rocks to the baskets of coal that were being hauled up out of their shaft. They did this so they could finish their quota of baskets early, as opposed to filling the basket completely full of coal. If they were caught doing this, the basket was sent back down, and often the convicts are punished. I'm on the northern side of the supervisor's cottage, and right in front of me here there's a lentil 1.4 metres long, and that would have been situated over a doorway that was here at one time. So what I expect is that the spoil from the fireplaces on this side of the house would have been brought out here and dumped where this large pile of spoil is, where Gracie's patiently sitting on the top of. And you can see it starts about here and travels right across to here and down that direction there. So the larger the spoil dump, to me, the longer the house has been resided in. From those two spoil dumps at the superintendent's cottage, you can see that this spoil dump here is not a one-off, and it's quite normal at most of the buildings here. If you're coming out the doorway, if you look close by, you will see one of these spoil dumps that's come out of the fireplace. And just for those that like to maybe suggest that the spoil there came from the military barracks, if you see where Gracie's sitting, there's a large spoil dump here, what I call fireplace spoil, and I reckon that would have come from the chimney that's located in the back corner there. Where Gracie's patiently laying now was once a large wooden wall, and that enclosed the complete area of the military barrack. The entrance to the compound here was on the other side. It wasn't where this current track comes up now from where the Unknown Cottage is. That means on this side here, this is as far as the person residing in this room here, where there's a tiny fireplace in the corner, would have taken the spoil from the fireplace and dumped it, and it would have been laying up against the wooden wall that enclosed the compound. They wouldn't have come out and taken the spoil down to where that dump is on the Unknown Cottage. From this large amount of spoil from the fireplace, we can confidently say that at one period of time down here, this building was actually occupied and the fireplace used on a very regular basis. The million-dollar question is, what was this building used for? In April of 1846, Lieutenant Hill, who was the military commander of the coal mines, wrote to John Hampton in Hobart, who was the Comptroller General, and he was in charge of the convict system in Van Diemen's Land, and Lieutenant Hill requested that a schoolroom be built at the coal mines for the 20 to 30 children that currently resided there. Now we know that children were born, resided, and sadly died at the coal mines. Some of the children that passed away during that time period were Marianne, Harriet, Alfred, and Joseph and William Hurst. So the children who did survive needed somewhere for an education. Why wasn't there a request put in for a schoolroom at the coal mines before 1846? Or around that time, there was a massive increase in the amount of civilian supervisors that were sent to the coal mines to supervise the convicts. In 1841, there were only 13 positioned there, while in 1845 there were 22. On top of that, there were the married troops that were stationed at the coal mines, whose numbers increased at the same period. With these extra married civilians and married troops, there were more children being born at the coal mines. Between 1844 and 1848, there were 17 children born at the coal mines. Though they would have been too young for school, many would have had older siblings of school age. They were the 20 to 30 children Lieutenant Hill referred to in his letter who desperately needed a means to access an education. John Hampton promptly wrote back to Lieutenant Hill, giving permission for the construction of a schoolhouse at the coal mines for the children. Does this mean the construction of the building went ahead? Unfortunately, the construction of the schoolhouse never started once the coal mines had received the letter to say to go ahead. We know this because of Charles Latrobe. He was the acting governor of Van Diemen's Land between 1846 and 1847, and he was also the first lieutenant governor of Victoria. And he was sent to Van Diemen's Land to do a report on the convict system, and in May of 1847 he stated that there was no schoolroom at the coal mines for the children. Point here is to note that Charles Latrobe actually came down to the coal mines late in 1846, and his report wasn't produced until May of 1847. So there's plenty of time there between when he actually visited the coal mines and later on for the schoolroom to be built during that time period. Around 1846, the coal mines was hit with some type of construction tsunami. Work started on the new military barracks, which is located behind the old military barracks on top of the hill. And construction also started on a new hospital for the convicts. These two projects were never completed. They never got past the stage of some sandstone foundations. But also being built at the same time was the separate apartments for the convicts. And this was located behind where Gracie's sitting now. And this was a 2-storey building, and they were sleeping cells for the convicts. On the bottom floor there was 54 cells, on the top another 54. And this building, I believe, would have used over 170,000 bricks. This picture here shows the same building at Maria Island. The building at the coal mines was built on the same plans, though the building at the coal mines had a lot less sleeping cells than what the one at Maria Island did, but it gives you a good idea of what would have been located in this position here. So of all this building going on, it explains why no attention was paid to the little schoolhouse on top of the hill. All the convicts that had building skills were located down at the separate apartments. Sometime during 1847, I believe that some convicts who had bricklaying skills were moved up to the schoolhouse, and there they just built the chimney and then left it at that, whether other convicts who had skills with timber built the timber walls, or maybe the parents of the children that were going to occupy the cottage, I don't know. But with all that construction going on, it explains why there was such a delay in building the schoolhouse after approval was given, and probably why it wasn't completed in brick. If approval was given for the building and there was time to build it, how do we know it was built here? Well, when Lieutenant Hill sent the letter to Hampton requesting the building construction, he also attached a plan. As most plans for the coal mines, it was a very simple plan. You can see there on the back the fireplace, in the front the doorway, and on each side a window. Now it shows there 15 feet by 10 feet as the dimensions, but that's actually from the inside wall to the inside wall going on the scale that was on the plan. I've actually measured from the outside wall to the outside wall on the plan and converted that to metres, which is the pink line you can see, and that gives me a length of 5.4 metres and a width of 3.5. Now my ropes are the blue arrows, and on the back I have 5.7 for the length, and then the width gives me 4.1. So my width with the ropes is just around half a metre longer than what the original plan showed. The reason why I didn't do the ropes off the plan is because when I was filming this I didn't have the plan and I wasn't sure that it was going to arrive at all. We were going to film in the bush, but there were tiger snakes everywhere, so I brought Gracie back out here to outside the bush. We roped it all up, and then once we finished filming, the plan arrived on the last day. So I thought, well, let's just see what the ropes are that I've laid out compared to what the actual plan is. There's no actual evidence on the ground to say the building is as wide as I had my ropes. The width of the building could have been exactly the same as what the measurement on the plan was. A lot of the plans that came down to the coal mines, they weren't exactly followed. In some cases they were adapted to what's on the ground, what materials were available, and what the skills the convicts had. At the same time, I might have been seduced by this piece of sandstone, which I believe at the time was located at the front door. That piece of sandstone could have come down from the military barracks with all the other blocks there, and what I was trying to do is possibly use that sandstone to paint a picture of something that wasn't actually happening on the ground at the time when the building was in existence. What may have happened though is once they decided to use timber for the walls instead of brick, it gave them the ability to enlarge the building over what the original plan showed. So regardless of the actual width for the building, why would it be built in this location? It seems to me it was the best location. The military would not like their children going down to the main settlement area and mixing where the convicts are. They'd like to keep them segregated on the hill, and the civilian officers down there with the children would have had a preference for the children being away from the convicts as much as they could down there and being up on the hill in the schoolroom. So it made good sense to build the schoolroom in this location here. No record in the archive that I've found gives us a record of what it was like inside the schoolroom for the children, but this image here might give some representation of what it might have been like. When Hampton wrote back to Lieutenant Hill proving the construction of the building, he authorised the building works to be done by the convicts, but anything above that must be paid for by the parents of the children. And I expect what he meant there was in regards to books, slate boards, chalk, stuff like that. The children themselves, they wouldn't have been sitting on desks. I don't think there would have been wooden benches maybe, or they would have been sitting on a floor made of timber, or possibly a bare floor. The convicts wouldn't have used this schoolroom. They were using the church chapel down at the main settlement for their schooling. This drawing was attached to the plans that Lieutenant Hill sent to Hobart in 1846, showing how he envisioned the schoolroom would look. Note above the doorway and windows that there is no lintel like there are at the base of the windows. And maybe he thinking of using timber as lintels, as we saw down at the civil officers' quarters at the coal mine. So even though the school children didn't get a schoolroom as Lieutenant Hill envisioned it, at the end of the day they did get something to learn in after all. This photo was taken around 1900, and in the distance you can see the military barracks, and in the foreground where my red arrow is you can see the remains of the chimney from the schoolhouse. It's interesting to note that around what's left of that small chimney there are no brick returns. There's a tiny bit of brick rubble there on the right hand side where we expect it to be. There are no remains of a wall going in any direction, so it's further proof that they actually built the chimney and built timber walls around it. This is Gracie and I visiting the schoolroom after the children had left with the families when the settlement was closed in late 1848. I'm sure the convicts did a better job building than I did with my Lego. Hopefully it gives you some idea of what the building may have looked like. The school children would have been given the task of cleaning out the fireplace now and then, and they would have brought out the spoil from the fireplace out the front door, and back then they would have dumped it up here somewhere, though over time it's travelled down the hill here. So there you have it, the schoolroom at the coal mines.